Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another, what I'm sure is going to be incredible time at Live at the Waterhole. So excited to be with you all again this afternoon. And there's been some quite widespread rain across the country. So I think our waterhole views are going to start to look a little bit different as the rainy season progresses. My name is Maxine Gaines. And yeah, great to have you all on board. Please send through all your questions and comments and join in the discussion. Look forward to hearing from you all this afternoon. This is a very active little waterhole at Tau Africam's Tau Game Lodge in Madikwe. Quite a lot of water birds there, which is great to see. Lots of red-billed teals, the little small duck-like birds in the foreground. Obviously a hardy-dar ibis there, busy pro soft mud. Haven't actually seen so many teals at this waterhole before. And then right in the foreground, we've got a lovely blacksmith lapwing as well. But wow, lots of activity here today from the teals especially. Oh, there's another little wader that is kind of in the middle of the screen in front of the teals there. Difficult to see any detail on it with the camera angle at the moment, but it's probably a sandpiper. Yes, it looks like it could be a wood sandpiper. I see a bit of white spots on the back. I think I'm going with wood sandpiper on that one. I'm starting to keep a little bird list for myself of all the birds that I see on Live at the Waterhole. I keep a life list, and whenever I go away on any holiday which involves birding, I always keep a little separate list for that holiday. And I decided it would be a nice idea to start keeping a list of all the sightings on Live at the Waterhole. So that's, I think, wood sandpiper might be a new one for my list, which is lovely. Greetings, Mercedes Bean. Lovely to have you on board with us this afternoon. I think it's going to be a good one. I'm sitting in a very rainy KwaZulu-Natal today, and it's going to be interesting to see if any of the waterholes around the country are also experiencing rain at the moment. Hi, Catherine. Lovely to have you on board with us again. You can hear some grey go-away birds in the background. Picasso says, hope you slept well and ready for business. Yes, slept very well. I've been up and about for quite some time already. But wherever you are in the world, hope you also slept well and that you're ready for an exciting afternoon at Live at the Waterhole. Dark Main Lover, good afternoon. It's always a pleasure to host the show, and thanks for being on board with us. There's definitely a more, I know that the foreground of this waterhole is quite green normally, but there definitely seems to be a slight green flush where I haven't seen a green flush before. So I think Tau might have had some rain in the last few days, which is good news. That kind of brown background there definitely looks like it's got a little tinge of green on it now. interesting to see the little open channels of water there in amongst all the green, which I'm sure is made by kind of hippos or animals having their own or their very specific routes that they come in and out of the water. And there we have our resident croc and a lovely grey heron doing some grooming. They are such elegant birds. Johan O wants to know what my life list number is. You know, Johan, I've actually been quite bad about tallying up my life list. So I've got all these separate lists. I've got my South African list. I've got my kind of African list. And then recently I have done some birding outside of Africa, mainly Borneo, Indonesia, places like that. But I haven't added the whole life list up together. So yeah, I'm not actually sure what my entire life list is. I need to actually put it all down on my computer and add it up. But my Southern African list is sitting at about 800 species. Still, I'm very short of pelagic birds. I get very seasick, so I haven't done enough pelagic trips. So I know I could up the numbers there, but and then also not enough trips to the west coast of Namibia where I know I'll get some lifers. But yeah, I think 800 species is not too shabby for my Southern African list. Catherine says you also do the same for all your trips. Yeah, I find it, I love doing a separate list for each trip. It makes it quite interesting to see how many birds you can get. For us as a family, we bird together as well, so it kind of becomes a little bit of a competition between us. And it's one of the ways that I've managed to get my two sons interested in birding. They love their birding. Oh, I can see some black-winged stilts there, and obviously lots of, well, not lots, but a little flock of cattle egrets as well. Everyone seems to be going about the daily business of grooming in the little flock of egrets. Keeping their feathers pristine and in good shape for flying. It is definitely the time of the year, though, to keep a close eye on all the little waders. There's always interesting vagrants and rare vagrants and migratory species popping up. Oh, what is that darker one there? Looks like it could be one of the moorhens, but it's quite tricky to see with this camera angle. I don't think it's a crake because it's got white on its wings, so it could possibly be a moorhen. I didn't get a good enough look at it. The camera was a bit far for the detail that I need. Sometimes at this year you get lesser moorhens popping up at these waterholes, which is a lovely one to get on your list. They're not common anywhere. They're quite secretive birds, quite difficult to see. I'm wondering, yeah, that it definitely looked moorhenish to me because it had a bit of a whitish streak on the side. It had the shape of a black crake. They do have a very similar kind of a body shape, but the black crake doesn't have the white on the side. I think it was probably a moorhen. Kayla says it's strange to see Tau this quiet. Yeah, there's not a lot of game around, but that's what I love about birding, you know. Whenever I'm in the bush, I've birded all my life. My dad was a passionate birder, so I think he handed me my first bird book when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I had some family members that also just really inspired me to get interested in birding. Other family members, uncles and great uncles, and I'm so grateful to them because I always find when I'm out in the bush, if there's no game, I'm never bored. There's always birds to look at. And I love just observing their behavior. It's not all about ticking them off a list. It's also about watching them closely and getting to understand the different species and their behavior. So I love my birding. I really do. And it just bides the time until something else comes along. As a guide, it's a wonderful tool when you're having a quiet game drive as well, to be able to focus on the birds. See, there's a little juvenile black-winged stilt there, so he's not quite as black on the back, close to the blacksmith lapwing. He's a youngster, he hasn't got his adult plumage yet. Thanks, Johan and Darkmane Lover 800. Well, it's not as impressive as it seems. I've been birding a long time, so I would ideally love my list to be more. But I'm also not a twitcher. I don't fly all over the country to see rare vagrants. If there's a rare vagrant that's in within a reasonable distance, or if it's a bird that I've really been looking for a long time, like my bogey bird, which is an African pitter, then I'd probably make a super effort to get it. But I like to kind of see birds in the area where they're supposed to be, and not necessarily tick off some bird that's been blown off course by a storm. I always feel sorry for the poor vagrants that land here, confused vagrants that have been blown off course by a storm. So I suppose if I did a bit more twitching, I would possibly have a bigger life list. But yeah, I'm just kind of slowly plugging at the life list. Johan O says you're still struggling to get 400 SA birds. Well, just keep at it. the, the great thing is that you've got a lot of species still to see. The more species you see, the harder it gets to add even one lifer to the list. Oh, Catherine, you said that you have been birding for about 2 years and that Wild Earth got you into that. Well, that's awesome. It's lovely that you've developed an interest in birds from Wild Earth. And yeah, it really, bird conservation is so important, and just an awareness of the birds that are out there. So I'm really thrilled that Wild Earth has done that for you. I'm sure it has brought a lot of joy to your life, which is fantastic. Darkmane Lover, what is the rarest bird in South Africa? Wow. Gosh, so there are some really rare vagrants that pop up occasionally. I'm not going to count them because they're kind of birds that shouldn't be here, but end up, once a year, someone will pop up somewhere. In terms of the resident species, the rarest, the Egyptian vulture used to be resident and breeding in South Africa, and it's now extinct. So that's quite sad. The green barbet is a very rare bird. It's very localized in one area in KwaZulu-Natal. It's the only place that you can find it. Blue swallows within southern Africa are pretty rare. Their habitat has been destroyed by forestry, commercial forestry, that has ripped up the mist belt grassland, which is the kind of habitat they need. So blue swallows would be a very rare species to see in South Africa. And maybe white-winged flufftail would also be one that many South African birders would consider to be very rare, very difficult to see. I've never seen one. That's quite high on my bucket list. Yeah, there's a few very rare species. And while we've been talking about rare species, we've got a baboon joining the fray. I love the way they always sit with their kind of elbows on their legs and their hands dangling down. They just look so relaxed. Okay, well, we're going to see what's happening at King's Camp, and we'll possibly head back to Tau later on. Let's see what's going on at King's Camp. Ah, so there's some rain. That's lovely to see. So great to see that the Lowveld is getting some good soaking rain, and obviously enjoying the good soaking rain are our resident terrapins. Interesting to see how he's inflating his throat like that. I often see that when either birds or reptiles are quite hot as a way of keeping cool. Not as easy to see now because he's angled his head a little bit away, but you can see how his throat is kind of almost in time with his breath, I suppose, going in and out like that. But often you see that it's called gula flapping, and they kind of do it to keep themselves cool in the heat. Now, I don't think that's what's going on here today, because on a rainy day like today, I very much doubt that it would be exceptionally hot. So yeah, interesting. Can't really think of a reason why he would be doing that on a rainy day. It is unusual to see on a cool day. I suppose it could also be almost a territorial or some kind of an advertisement to another terrapin. I can see there's quite a lot of speckles and things on that throat, so he might just be making himself visible for some reason. They don't need to do that to breathe, so I don't think it's about breathing. Joan Mello, happy Monday to you too. Good to have you on board. Oh, lovely rain. This is just the best kind of rain to come when the earth is still quite bare. You don't want torrential downpours that can wash away topsoil. You want this gentle soaking rain that just soaks in and awakens all the seeds that are lying dormant in the soil, that can then sprout and form a nice covering over the soil. So this is really the best type of early season rain. Lovely to see. Yeah, I'm going to have to do some reading on this behavior with the terrapins. It's very, very interesting. Okay, so this is really interesting because I didn't think it had to do with breathing, but I've just looked at an article here now that says that now it's not this specific species of terrapin, but a diamondback terrapin, but it talks about how they need to breathe by gula pumping, or they often use gula pumping as a way of breathing. And that's really interesting because I've never noticed terrapins doing that as a matter of course. So So perhaps there's a reason why this terrapin needs to do it. But it definitely says amphibians breathe in part through positive pressure called gular pumping, and turtles are capable of gular pumping. But this assists with olfaction, not ventilation. That's interesting. So in turtles, the gular pumping is actually something that assists with their sense of smell, not with breathing. So I'm wondering if that isn't perhaps the case with the terrapins as well, because I've seen many terrapins sitting for hours on the side of a dam, and I've never noticed this gular pumping before. I'm sure I would have noticed it if it was something that they did all the time to help them breathe. So I'm wondering if this terrapin is not perhaps smelling something or using it to enhance his sense of smell. Very interesting. You see, there he stopped, and I'm sure he would still be breathing, but he isn't kind of gular pumping as much as he was before. So I think it might have to do with a sense of smell. I see Dark Main Lovers asked, why do terrapins have a very bad odor? You know, I think it has something to do with the defense mechanism. They do smell terrible, and I've actually rescued terrapins a few times. Oh, sorry, I'm going to carry on with what your answering your question there. But did you see that little creature on its back foot? I think it was a leech. As he moved his back foot, there was a little worm-looking like creature that was stuck to his back foot. I think it was probably a leech. So Dark Main Lover, they do have a really bad smell. I've often picked them up if I'm about to ride through a puddle and it looks like they're not going to move out of the way. I have on occasion moved them, and they really don't smell very good. But I think it's just a consequence of where they spend their time. The edges of these the mud in these water holes can be really, really stinky. It's quite, the mud doesn't have a lot of oxygen in it, and it starts to smell really bad when it's exposed to oxygen when it moves around. It's full of buffalo dung and elephant dung and urine. So a pretty stinky place to be. But I'm sure that it also just enhances their kind of way of protecting themselves. Many animals won't want to eat something that smells that bad, or they might think twice about picking it up or eating it if it really smells bad. So lovely to hear the gentle sound of the raindrops falling at this camera. I'm going to do some more reading on that kind of gular pumping that we're seeing, but I have a suspicion that if turtles use it to help with their sense of smell, it might be the same for terrapins. They are quite closely related, and that would make the most sense to me, because I certainly don't see it often. Okay, well, we're going to leave this chap here and head over to Hyena Pan in Botswana, and let's see if they're getting some rain. Ah, lovely. Got some giraffes. No rain, but beautiful giraffes coming down to drink. Gorgeous dark boy, this. Look at the little oxpecker coming down his leg, using the leg to get down. And I thought he was going to go down for a drink, going all the way down the leg, but then the giraffe moved. I have seen that before with animals standing at the edge of the water, and then the oxpeckers kind of hanging off the bottom of their legs and drinking themselves. I noticed as we first came over to this this African that the two giraffes that were coming down to drink were quite differently coloured. The one that we're looking at now was very dark compared to the other one. Amazing to see the difference in coloration in these giraffes. Here comes a lighter one. Also much smaller, looks like it could be a female. Typical, he's chosen to go down and drink behind the tree, or the sticks as James Henry would call them. I even see some clouds in the sky there, so here's hoping that this part of Botswana is going to get some rain soon. That definitely looks like a female. Lovely Cape turtle doves calling in the distance there. Such a ubiquitous sound of Southern Africa, that's for sure. Grace is asking, which locations have I travelled to where we have Africans? Obviously the Sabi Sands. I've been up to the Timbavati. I've been to Madikwe. I have been obviously to Kruger's Shalati area. I've been up to East Africa, to Kenya, not to the exact spot where the where the Africams are, though. I haven't been to those exact destinations, but definitely close by in Kenya. Trying to think where else there are Africams. I've been to Boulders, where the penguins are. I've been to Tembe Elephant Park, where we always see elephants at that pan. This chap drinks quite quickly. He doesn't keep his head down for long. Now, giraffes can't keep their heads down for that long because of the problem with their blood pressure being so high. But he seems to keep his head down for just a very, very short period of time compared to other giraffes I've seen. He is beautiful, though, with his dark patches. Okay, it seems like this feed is a little bit unstable, so we're going to leave Hyena Pan for now and go to the Africam at King's Camp. Back to our little terrapin enjoying the rain. Seems like the rain's got a bit harder since we were here a few minutes ago. They always look so funny when they kind of wave their legs around trying to find purchase. Oops! It does a very quick dive into the water. Oh, this rain is just exactly what we need. After a long dry season, it is just magnificent. Yeah, Tracy said it would be cool to see how it got onto the log as well. Yeah, they're quite good at scrambling out of the water onto logs and rocks and things. They don't look very agile, but they seem to be able to get around on land quite well. And they move far from water. I often find them in puddles that are just a long, long, long way from water, from permanent water. And that the puddle wasn't there the day before. You've had a heavy downpour of rain and you've got these puddles, and suddenly every puddle is full of terrapins or frogs. It's incredible how far they come. Okay, well, we're going to leave King's Camp, leave the rain, and let's go see if it's raining elsewhere in the country. I'm actually really enjoying seeing the different weather today. Back at Tau. It's definitely not raining there at the moment. Tau is quite a long way from the Timbavati, though. It's right over in the northwest, whereas the Timbavati's kind of northeast. Crocodile looks beautiful and clean today. Hasn't got a lot of mud or dried sand on it. That waterhole looks so shallow that I wonder how the croc is actually keeping himself fed. It doesn't look like there's very many deep places in that water for him to hide. Now, crocs do eat a lot of fish. In some places, it makes up 80% of their diet. And in other places where food is quite seasonal, like for instance in the Serengeti or the Masai Mara, where the migrations cross the rivers at certain times of the year, the crocs can gorge themselves and then go months and months without feeding. So reptiles definitely have a way of being able to slow down their metabolism, and they don't require food regularly. So you might find in the dry season, when the water is not that high, that this crocodile doesn't actually get much food, and then as the water levels rise, he takes full advantage of that in the wet season. And they are, of course, very capable of traveling quite long distances over land to get to water if the water does dry up where they are, or if there's not much food in the water where they are. He looks like he's having a real snooze. His eyes were open when we got here, but now he's closed his eyes. Oh, there we go. Opened them again. Closed them. Obviously very aware of his surroundings, but quite relaxed, having a little rest. Apparently all the animals are hiding today, and this is one of our busiest feeds, so we'll stick a towel for a while and see what else happens. It's actually wonderful to get a real close-up, detailed look at the scales and the skin of the crocodile. I'm loving seeing his eye open and shut as well. They are just such primitive creatures, unchanged by evolution for millions and millions and millions of years, just so incredibly well adapted for what they need to be. Catherine says she's been to Okakuyu, Ongama, Victoria Falls, and Hyena Pan. Oh yeah, I forgot about Okakuyu and Victoria Falls. I've also been there. And I've been fairly close to where Hyena Pan is as well. Luke Powell says you love our commentary, best channel on YouTube. That's so awesome, Luke. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. And it's made possible by all of you interacting with us and chatting to us and asking questions. It's wonderful. Darkmane Lover, wow, that is a big croc. Yeah, it is. It does look like quite an impressive crocodile. Some of the biggest crocs I have ever seen are in the Mara River up in Kenya, and a few in the Zambezi River as well have been monster crocs. It's always difficult on these cameras to get perspective and know exactly how big they are, but this definitely looks like an impressive crocodile. It's very possible that this crocodile could be guarding as well, guarding a nest or guarding eggs. At this time of the year, the eggs should be close to hatching. This is the breeding season for them, so they will be finding places to lay their eggs, and then the females are quite good at guarding the area. They'll be close by. They're not necessarily exactly where they've laid their eggs, but close enough that they can potentially stop something from raiding the nest and digging it up. And they obviously will be very close by when the eggs hatch and they need to carry their young to the water. Oh, there's a lovely heron. Looks like a grey heron. I also did see swimming around in the distance again what looked like a moorhen. I didn't see it. I don't see it. Oh, there it is on the side, the upper left there. It looks like it is a moorhen. I think probably what we saw earlier was a moorhen as well. Difficult to see at this distance, but I think it's just a normal moorhen and not a lesser moorhen. Need to get a closer look at the beak to know for sure. The lesser moorhen is quite a bit smaller than just your regular moorhen, but they also have a little bit of different coloration on the forehead and the beak. So to be 100% sure, you'd have to look at that. Ah, there we go. Okay, that definitely looks like just your normal moorhen. It's got a lovely red shield with just the tip of the beak showing yellow, whereas the lesser moorhen has more yellow on the beak. That one is a regular moorhen. I think that's another first for my live at the waterhole bird list. That grey heron looked like it may have seen something and suddenly got very alert. It's definitely a birding day today. See how I don't know if you heard, as he kind of turned his head like that and lowered his head, it was in response to an alarm call by another bird. I didn't quite get what bird made the alarm call, but I heard an alarm call, and the grey heron immediately reacted by ducking down and turning his head. Well, he would obviously be vulnerable to birds of prey. I have heard of African fish eagles taking grey herons and even taking things as big as flamingos. So probably needs to be quite alert to potential predators from above. Here's some chin spot batises in the background there. And sounds like some blue axbills as well. Very high-pitched, squeaky sounds you can hear. You can see how windy it is by the way those black, beautiful black plumes on his head are being blown around. Jamie's asking, Jamie asked, what's the most amount of crocs you have ever seen here at once? Jamie, I've only ever seen one at this waterhole, but I haven't been doing live at the waterhole for very long. I do pop in occasionally, even when I'm not hosting it. I've never seen more than one, but I'm sure there would be. A small waterhole like this can definitely house more crocs. Sometimes in very dry times there'll be loads of crocs around one very small little waterhole. Well, there looks like there's what is that? Reflection of something in the water that's coming down to drink. I'm struggling to see what it is from its reflection, though. It's definitely, is it a waterbuck or what is that? Yes, it looks like a waterbuck. Yeah, so I've only seen one here, but that's not to say that there aren't more, or that there couldn't be more, even around quite a small waterhole. And then Mike asked, do the crocs ever try to attack the birds? I have seen crocodiles taking birds before, but I was actually discussing this, I think, last time I was hosting. It surprises me always how close the birds get to the crocodiles. And they don't seem to worry about them. And I'm wondering if it isn't the fact that if they can see them, they're aware of them and they're kind of ready to react. The couple of times that I have seen crocodiles taking birds, it's been when the crocs have been submerged in the water and they've kind of taken the birds by surprise. I've never seen a crocodile taking a bird where the crocodile's been visible and the birds have kind of been able to see it. So that might be the deciding factor there. If the crocodile's submerged and he's in hunting mode, then anything is game, whether it's a waterbuck, whether it's a yellow-billed stork or an Egyptian goose. Whereas when he's lying out in the open, everything's kind of aware that he's there and he's not going to be able to surprise anything. Oh, that waterbuck is really enjoying that lush green grass. And obviously not too concerned about crocodiles in the water, I'm sure, because the water is so shallow and it's just so difficult for them to remain hidden at this time of the year. Waterbucks, I'm sure most of you know this, but for those of you that might be new to watching, waterbuck have oily glands on their skin that secrete an oil that is actually, it's very strong smelling. If you get close to a waterbuck on safari or in the bush, you really can smell that you're close to a waterbuck. They have a very distinctive odor, and it's a very strong smell. And it's a waterproofing kind of mechanism because they do spend so much time in the water. There are kind of bush legends that say that it makes them unpalatable to lions or to crocodiles, but I've seen many crocodiles with a waterbuck meal, and I've also seen many lions that have killed waterbucks. So I don't think that it does make them unpalatable. I think it's more to do with water, making them more waterproof because of the amount of time that they spend kind of wandering around in very wet, damp areas. Victor says, what other animals have a bad odor? Victor, wild dogs smell particularly potent, and it's definitely not an odor that I would say is pleasant. But it is a very, very strong, very distinctive smell. You can't confuse it for anything else, just like you can't confuse the smell of a waterbuck for anything else. I have on occasion on game drives smelt the wild dogs before I have even known of their presence or seen tracks or had any evidence that they were there, but just that pungent smell, and you kind of suddenly think, gosh, there's wild dogs close by, and then true as Bob, you find them. So they definitely have a very pungent, I don't even know how to describe the smell. It's not like anything. I think I've heard some people say it's a goaty odor, but I have smelt goat, and to me it doesn't smell like wild dog. But yeah, it's a very pungent smell. Waterbuck the same. And then obviously you get some animals that can release a pungent smell in the form of urine. Skunks and things like striped polecats in Africa come to mind. That's similar to a skunk from America. We have something called a striped polecat, but that animal doesn't smell like that constantly. They actually have to spray urine, which then has that kind of acrid, pungent smell. So the only two that I would say that I can think of that really have a very distinctive, very pungent odor that kind of emanates from their body would be waterbuck and wild dog. Elephants, you'll know that you're close to them, but it's really just because of the smell of their droppings, their fresh droppings or urine has quite a pungent odor. But if you don't smell the droppings or the urine, it's not like the body is actually giving off a strong smell. I would imagine that other members of the waterbuck genus might also have strong smells because most of them are water-loving antelope that spend a lot of time in water. I've spent quite a bit of time in the Okavango Delta where you get the red lechwe, which is closely related to the waterbuck. I can't say I ever noticed them smelling, but maybe I haven't spent long enough around them to have realized that they do have a smell. But things like puku and lechwe, the black lechwe and the red lechwe, are quite closely related to the waterbuck and also spend a lot of time in water. So it wouldn't surprise me if they had the same kind of smell. But I am guessing there because I've never actually smelt them or noticed their smell, should I say. I was going to say that it was quite unusual to see just one female waterbuck on her own, but then as the camera panned off to the left there, I noticed that there were a few of them. It would be unusual to have just one. They like to be in little groups. Oh, look at that crocodile having a nice big yawn. So he's obviously feeling quite cool today. Well, now, as I say that, he's starting to open his mouth, so maybe it is heating up. Before this, he's been lying with his mouth closed, but opening his mouth like that is a sign that he is perhaps wanting to cool himself down. And one of the only ways that a crocodile can cool down efficiently is by opening the mouth and allowing the moisture within the mouth to evaporate from that very thin layer of skin in the mouth. And then that evaporative cooling will then cool the blood that is being pumped around the lining of the mouth. And that blood can then be transported to the rest of the body and keep him cool. So it must be starting to get a little bit warmer in Madikwe Game Reserve at Tau Game Lodge. We were talking earlier about birds and crocodiles, and I've never witnessed this. I have heard many people talking about how sometimes a bird will come and take the bits and pieces of meat or debris out of a crocodile's mouth, and that the crocodile is quite tolerant and will allow the birds to do that. I can't say I've ever witnessed it myself, but I have heard a number of stories told about people that have witnessed those things, and I'm never quite sure whether it's a kind of a bush legend or whether it actually does happen, but quite interesting to think about. I suppose the benefit for the crocodile is that if they do have bits and pieces of meat stuck between their teeth, that can cause bacterial infection, so it's better to get rid of it. So it would kind of make sense, I suppose, as a symbiotic relationship, but I've never actually seen or witnessed it myself. Catherine says wild dogs have no odor to her other than wet dog smell. Sure, Catherine, I really find their smell to be very different to anything else. I'm a dog person. I have 3 dogs at home, all of whom love the water. I've got a Springer Spaniel and a Labrador and a German Shorthaired Pointer. And so I know wet dog smell really. I'm very familiar with wet dog smell. And to me, a wild dog smells very different to that. But smell is an interesting thing, because the way that each person perceives a smell is not necessarily the way that someone else perceives a smell. Just because I smell something and think, well, this smells like that, it might not smell the same to someone else. I remember when I was at Juma last, and Albertus the camop, who I worked with quite a lot at the time, every time I pointed out the leopard popcorn smell, the smell of the popcorn urine, he just said he could not smell popcorn. He absolutely could not smell popcorn. So, perhaps for him, leopard urine doesn't smell like popcorn. It's quite interesting. But many people that I know of that have smelled leopard urine have made that association with popcorn. But I suppose if, could just be something different about the receptors in your body that pick up chemicals, and maybe the smell to you smells different. It's very interesting. Well, we're going to head over to the camera at Victoria Falls and see if there's anything happening there. I loved that one last time. There was lots of vultures and marabou storks. Let's go see what's happening there today. Wow, wow. Ooh, what a lovely view of them this time. Last time we didn't get this aerial shot of the vultures and the marabou storks. Lovely to see them drinking as well. It's not something you often see, as vultures having a drink. Oh, marabou stork's not happy with the vulture sharing its water. Looks like quite a few white-backed vultures there, and then I can see some hooded vultures as well. Looking to see if there are any other vulture species. Last time I was here, I also saw just the two species, but I'm sure that every now and then there'd be some different ones that pop up. White-backed and Cape vultures can be quite difficult to tell apart if you don't see kind of two quite close together. The Cape vulture is a bit bigger, but superficially they look quite similar to one another. Cape vultures, sadly, I think used to breed in Zimbabwe, but I think the last thing I read was that there's actually no active breeding colonies of Cape vulture in Zimbabwe anymore, which is very sad. I think they do still pop up there. They do still fly. They are tremendous. They cover tremendous distances when they fly. So you do still get sightings of Cape vultures. Oh, look, that marabou stork's got a piece of bone or skin or something there. You can see how the hooded vultures seem to be picking up little bits and pieces from the soil. Now that would probably be little bone fragments that have either been broken up by hyenas, which would be the natural process for these vultures to get small bone fragments. They can't break the bones themselves, so they rely on hyenas to do that. But if hyenas aren't present, and at places like vulture restaurants, the people managing the vulture restaurant will actually smash the bones into little bits and pieces so that the vultures can actually get those little fragments, which are crucial for not only for themselves, but also when they're raising chicks, for the chicks' bones to develop properly and for those chicks not to be deformed. They have to be fed these little bone fragments that give them the calcium they need for their bones to grow strong. Rosie Adams, hello. It's lovely to have you on board with us. So I was saying that vultures can't break bones into little bits, and certainly that is true of the species that occur here and of almost every vulture species. But the bearded vulture, which is a vulture of mountainous areas in Africa and up into various parts of Europe, they actually can break bones, and the way they do it is quite interesting. They will find a flat kind of rocky shelf, and they will then take big bones from a carcass or from a vulture restaurant like this, and they will fly over that rocky shelf at quite a height, and they will then drop the bones onto the rock, and it fragments, and then they can come down and feed on the little bits and pieces of bone. And also, very importantly for bearded vultures, they feed on bone marrow. And they can get access to that bone marrow by breaking open the big bones. So that is something that bearded vultures have evolved to learn to do, but none of the other vulture species can do that. So they really do rely on hyenas to do that job for them. That's one of the reasons why in places where hyenas have been extirpated, or where hyenas are no longer, where they've been eliminated by humans, certain vulture species find it actually quite difficult to survive. That hyena provides an integral link in the vulture food chain. I see how that white-backed vulture dominated the little hooded vulture there. The hooded vultures are so much smaller than them, they can't really compete. So they often have to wait for the scraps. But the hooded vulture's advantage lies in his quite small beak. So once the white-backed vultures have finished kind of pulling off the flesh from the bones, the hooded vulture can still get his beak into the little crevices and cracks that the white-backed vultures missed and get some food that way. They all have their place in the kind of food chain and the hierarchy, and it all fits together so beautifully. Vultures are actually my favorite birds. My very favorite bird is a bearded vulture. I love them. But I always enjoy watching vultures. They're so maligned, and I actually get quite offended when people say, talk about the ugly five and include vultures in that. I certainly don't think any animal's ugly, but I just think vultures are so beautiful. I don't know why people see them as being ugly. If you really have a close look at them, they are magnificent birds, and so maligned and so desperately in need of attention from a conservation perspective. So many of them now are classified as critically endangered. And I just really love them. So this is wonderful to be able to watch them like this. Very special. Okay, well, we're going to leave the vultures to fight over their scraps, and we're going to go and have a look at what's happening at Tembe in northern KwaZulu-Natal. Oh, wow. Lovely herd of impala. I'm actually really surprised to see that there's no rain there at the moment, because where I'm sitting, not too far away, there's rain. Oh, and we've got our beautiful, gorgeous bush shrike calling in the background. Always seems to be one calling here at Tembe. Such a beautiful sound. Oh, here comes a nyala, male nyala. Often see them hanging around with the impala. Just safety in numbers, I suppose. A couple of male nyala coming down to drink. KwaZulu-Natal has a very, very high population of nyala. Of all the areas in the country, I'd say the highest population density of nyala must be in KwaZulu-Natal, in the kind of northern Zululand areas. I can also hear way in the background a red-chested cuckoo calling, which is always a sign of summer in KZN. purple-crested Turako calling in the distance there as well. It's quite a young male in Nyala. His horns, Nyala have spiral horns, and it's only really got one turn to it, so he's got quite a bit of growing to do before he is mature. And they are such pretty antelope. Oh, look at the belly on that female impala. She is very, very pregnant. Any day now, from kind of the middle of November, I always expect to see the first baby impalas being born. That is a very pregnant mommy. Joan Mello, you are asking, you're saying that you've heard that wild dogs and hyenas can smell quite bad, and do any of the cats smell bad? So Joan, I know that hyenas can smell bad when they've been in a carcass. You know, if they've been feeding on a rotten carcass, they can smell bad. But I wouldn't say that a hyena, you know, if a hyena walks past me quite closely, I don't think it has a bad smell, unless it's been on a carcass, in which case it's got the smell of the carcass. And the same goes for the cats. They keep themselves quite clean. I think they need to keep themselves clean because they need to know that their smell is not going to carry when they are hunting. And so I don't notice that hyenas or any of the cats smell particularly bad unless it is, you know, when they've just finished on a smelly carcass, but they'll clean themselves up pretty quickly, both species, you know, both hyenas and leopard, lion, cheetah will clean themselves up very, very quickly. Wild dogs probably don't need the element of surprise as much as the cats. You know, they move and they don't try and hide when they're hunting. They kind of just move as a group, and when they see something, they chase. So they possibly don't need to worry about their smell as much as a hyena or a lion would. I see, Rosie Adams, you're saying you've just ordered the Newman's Bird Book update. That's great. Newman's has been my bird book of choice since my dad gave me my first Newman's when I was very, very young. I love Newman's. It's a great bird book. It's definitely the one I always take into the field with me. And then Rosie, you also asked, do any of them have a dominant eye or just the small birds? I'm not sure. If you're meaning vultures, whether they have a dominant eye or not, I actually don't know the answer to that. Their eyesight has to be so good and their binocular vision has to be so good. But whether they use one eye over another, I would have to do some research on that. I'm not sure. And then you also say vultures do a kind of a keystone job in nature. They certainly do. The function that they perform is very, very important, getting rid of carcasses that could just breed all kinds of disease. So they certainly do perform a keystone function. Lovely to watch that girl ruminating there. She's so alert, even though she's lying down. She's chosen a nice open area to lie, and she's obviously got the protection of the herd around her who will alert her to any danger, but you still see how she's constantly looking around her, her ears are flicking, ready to jump up at a moment's notice. Watch as she swallows. If the angle is correct, you can see the next ball of cud coming up for her to chew. So once she swallows this one, just have a close look at the front of her neck, and you should be able to see her regurgitating a fresh ball of cud to chew. There we go. Lovely view of that. You see it so nicely in giraffes because of their long, long necks, but I always love to watch it in the other animals as well. Such a fascinating process. There goes the next one. So Wendy is asking if all impala across Africa give birth around this time due to the rutting season, or do some antelope have a different rutting season? So, Wendy, certainly in southern Africa, the rutting season is fairly similar, and it's in order to time the births for the rainy season. So in southern Africa, our rainy season throughout most of southern Africa is the summer, other than the Western Cape where you don't really find impala. But certainly in most of southern Africa, the rutting season is timed, or throughout most of Africa, but certainly in southern Africa, the rutting season is at a certain time so that the babies are born now, which is when the rainy season starts. As you travel further north towards kind of more, as you get closer to the equator or closer to the tropics, the rainy season there is very different to down in southern Africa. So they have the long rains and the short rains, and the rutting season would be different accordingly. So in all cases, the rutting season would be timed to allow the baby impalas to be born during the rainy season. And for southern Africa, that would mean that the baby impalas would be born around late November into early December. But up in East Africa, where the rainy season is very different, the rutting time would be different there as well. And I'm struggling to remember what that is. The rainy season in East Africa, I think the long rains are around May. So that is very different to our rainy season down here, where our rainy season is generally starts around now, around November. So yeah, the rutting season really depends on the rainy season, and it would be about 7.5 months before the rainy season starts. So in East Africa, where the migration happens, The wildebeest give birth in March. They give birth on the short grass plains of the Serengeti, which is up near Ngorongoro Crater, and that happens in March. And if my memory serves me correctly, I worked up in East Africa. Gosh, we left there in 2000 and end of 2006. So I'm trying to think back, but I'm pretty sure that the impalas all gave birth at around the same time, and the Thompson's gazelles. They all kind of time their births so that there's just this flood of babies at one time, which then allows some of those babies to have. Oh, there's some beautiful female Inyala. So pretty. Nyala must be some of the most pretty antelope species around. They really are gorgeous. And they would also be mostly pregnant and about to give birth around the same time as the impala. Their rutting season isn't as well defined, so you'll sometimes find babies born at odd times, but there's definitely a peak of birthing around this time of the year as well. It's a white-faced whistling duck behind the Inyala there, just popping its head up every now and then. And those gorgeous bush shrikes are very vocal. Yeah, there's a few white-faced whistling ducks there. See how that one female Inyala on the left responded to the one in the middle. Just very alert all of a sudden. They're so aware of each other's body language. When one looks alert, the other one responds as well, just to check that there's nothing coming. So interesting. It's one of the few times lately that I've watched live at the waterhole and not seen elephants at any of the feeds. It's fascinating. But it is a sign of summer and a sign of the rainy season, as the rains come and the little pans and the rivers start flowing and the little pans fill up, then there's not as much need for the elephants to come down to these water holes to drink. So there will be less and less elephant sightings at these water holes as we head into summer. And it really is a kind of a special winter privilege to be able to watch all the elephant activity that we get to watch. Or I shouldn't say winter, but more of a dry season privilege. Up in Kenya and places like that, it's more about the wet season and the dry season rather than winter versus summer. can hear the white-faced whistling ducks whistling in the background there. Normally they do that when they take off. As they fly, they whistle like that, so something may have disturbed them. It's a very unusual call for a duck. I'm sure a lot of you might be surprised to hear that whistling sound belongs to a duck. But there are a few duck species that whistle rather than make the typical kind of quacking noises that we associate with ducks. Oh, shame. That impala doesn't look like she's in very good condition, the one closest to the camera. It's very unusual to see impala looking skinny and not in good condition. They always, no matter what the time of the year is when other animals start to look skinny, impala always seem to manage to look fat and glossy and healthy. But that one impala there is looking quite skinny. Obviously not well. Well, Mindy says Nyal is her favorite antelope. Yeah, they are really beautiful, Mindy. We're going to link quickly to Tau Lodge and see what's happening there. Leave this little herd of impala to their grazing. Oh, we still have our water buck feeding at the pan. I'm amazed that there is actually still green grass growing at this waterhole because there really doesn't seem to be much grazing anywhere else, and the water buck are constantly feeding here. Something caught her attention there. Waterbuck always remind me a little bit of reindeer. I don't know why, but they kind of look like an African version of a reindeer. Other than the antlers, of course. Oh, hi Della. It's lovely to have you on board with us, and thank you for your kind words. Yeah, I'm really enjoying Live at the Waterhole. It's been quite fascinating for me. I'm enjoying doing it. Looking forward to lots more Live at the Waterholes. I suppose it's such a almost a catch-22 for these waterbuck though, because there's so little green grass anywhere that they obviously need to come into the water here to graze. Waterbuck are grazers. They don't browse. They need grass. And yet coming into the water does make them vulnerable to the odd crocodile. So they really have to weigh up their chances. And I suppose they pay close attention when they're heading down to the water to try and make sure that there are no crocs close by. But it is a bit of a risky business, standing right in the middle of the water while you're trying to get your food. Jones says you love the ring around the butt. Yeah, it does make them quite unique, these southern waterbuck with their rings around their rear ends. Up in East Africa you get the divisive waterbuck, and the divisive waterbuck looks almost identical, but instead of a ring around its rear end, it actually has just a white circle, a white splotch on the rear end. Gosh, that waterbuck is really doing a very efficient job of grazing the grass on that little piece of land there. Oh, it looks like we've got some new visitors heading down to Tembe, where we've just left. So let's go back there and see who's coming down to drink. Ah, yay. Our first Ellie. It would have been really strange to do a live at the waterhole and not have at least one elephant somewhere. I can hear the white-faced whistling ducks in the background, also sounding a bit disturbed. I wonder if the Ellie didn't disturb them as he headed down to the water. Lovely to just listen to him drinking. I'm wondering if there's not another elephant approaching. Just the way he kind of turned and looked for a while with his trunk in his mouth like that made me think that he was perhaps looking at something. Very distinctive, gorgeous bush shrike calling in the distance there or in the background. Don't see any other ellies. I wonder what it was he was looking at. Definitely seemed to be looking at something. I suppose he could have also just heard something and just stopped drinking for a moment just to listen. Seems to be being bothered by some kind of biting insects, the way he's flapping his tail from side to side. Gosh, he's really having a good drink of water. He's put a number of trunkfuls into his mouth there. I'd say he may have drunk close to 50 litres in one sitting. There's a little African jacana coming up. Oh, two of them coming up behind him there. Also looks like possibly a little emerald spotted wood dove that was running up and down on the ground. Oh, he's had a really good drink, probably about 50 litres of water. And on a cool day like today, he might not have to come down and drink again. Jeremy, you say so peaceful. Yeah, it is. It's lovely to actually just listen for a bit to the beautiful bird calls and the sound of the elephant drinking. Those of you that are living in cities far away from the wilderness, this is just such a great way to connect and kind of reground ourselves, rewild ourselves, just keep that connection to nature going. It's a real privilege to be able to sit and watch these places and know that this is happening right as we watch. Very special. And just like that, he's gone. Oh, I can't wait to see all the little impala running around so soon now, I'm sure. A little African jacana there on the left, wandering quite far from the water's edge. That impala that's in the middle of the frame there, it looks like her ears are bothering her. I've just been watching her for a while. She's holding her ears at quite a funny angle. I'm wondering if she doesn't have ticks in them. She's definitely not holding them the way the other impalas are. She's kind of keeping them down. Every now and then she flicks them around, but there's definitely something going on with those ears. She's not happy. The tick load in northern KwaZulu-Natal compared to elsewhere in the country, when I go walking in the KwaZulu-Natal bush compared to up in Kruger or places like that, the number of ticks you get on your clothes and your body is just phenomenal compared to other parts of the country. So impala generally have a way of, they groom each other and they have a comb-like structure in their teeth that allows them to keep themselves fairly free of ticks. But one of the places that they wouldn't be able to get a tick out of would be the ear. So probably she has ticks inside that ear that's making her feel a little bit uncomfortable. Sounds to me like there's an elephant splashing water somewhere, but I see the zoomy was trying to find it, but it didn't seem to be anything visible. But there's definitely a very loud water splashing noise going on in the background. So the female with the ears that I was talking about is right on the far left of the screen. And she's definitely not a happy impala, holding her ears down at a very strange angle. Must be terrible to have ticks in your ears that you can't get out. You can see as she lifts her head there, even with her head lifting up, she's not pricking her ears up like she normally would. She's keeping them down. Shame. Must be really painful if she's got an ear infection or something from ticks in the ears. But it's amazing how tough these animals are. You know, they don't have the advantage of running to the doctor every time they're hurting, and they somehow manage to pull through and overcome. And the ones that don't become, you know, the vital food source of predators who prey on the weak and the sick. It's all part of the whole food chain, part of the cycle of nature. These girls all look very fat and healthy, though. Fat and healthy and expecting. Tim, that girl's, she's scratching her ear now. I don't know if you noticed that with her hind leg. She was giving her ear a good scratch. There's definitely something wrong there. Shame, girlie. There we go. Scratching again. So I see Rosie Adams says that she saw her put her hoof into her ear. Yes, I also noticed that, Rosie. She's the one there on the far left again. Look how when she lifts her head up, how she doesn't bring her ears up. The ears are down all the time, like she's trying to hold them closed, or yeah, maybe that position just is less painful for her. And it's both the ears, not just one ear. She seems to be holding both of them in the same way. She's now a little bit obscured by the one that's standing in front of her. Oh, something scared the little male. But even when she put her head up there, trying to be alert, even then her ears weren't at their full kind of stretch like a typical alert impala would be. Luckily, she's got the benefit of being in a herd, and the other impala can help her in terms of hearing and keeping ears and eyes open for predators. But she's not a happy girl. Shame. She also looks like she's pregnant, so she's gonna have a little lamb. Let's hope she can sort out her problems before she ends up giving birth. Often an animal with a high tick load could be a sign that there's something else wrong with them. Animals that are feeling sick or are ill, they don't groom themselves as much. They don't spend as much time getting rid of ticks, maybe allowing the ticks a chance to crawl up into the ear that wouldn't normally. And so a heavy tick load on an animal can be an external sign that there's something not quite right. And then those animals, unfortunately, do tend to be the ones that fall prey to the cheetah or the leopard or the lion. It's always hard to see. You just want to go there and help her and dig the ticks out of the ears for her or help her in some way. But it's all part of the cycle. She's getting lots of food though, so maybe, as the grass comes and the food gets better, her immune system might get better and she might be able to pull herself right. These animals are so tough. Rosie Adams is asking if the ticks would die off. Not necessarily, Rosie. Some ticks specifically go to the ears. So there's various tick species that have some ticks are generalists and you'll find them all over the body. And then other ticks have certain parts of the animal that they like to be on. And there are certain ticks that go into the ears specifically, and they can live in those ears for a long time. Generally, a tick will fall off when it has had a blood meal. Once it's had enough of a blood meal, it will fall off and then go and lay its eggs. And then, depending on whether it's certain ticks then die after laying their eggs, other ticks will then go back onto another host and start the whole cycle again. But what can sometimes happen is that, if a tick does fall off, instead of coming out of the ear, it might actually drop further down into the ear canal and die there. And then that can cause problems. I know as a horse owner, that has happened to my horse before, and I've actually had to get the vet out to flush the ear out and get rid of ticks that have actually dropped down into that ear canal. So that could be what has happened to her. And I suppose if her immune system is strong enough, as the summer rains come and there's plentiful food around, she might be able to shake it off and get better. But what a wonderful afternoon it's been. So much happening. Not so many ellies, but lots of other species around. It's been really great, and sad to see that impala, but let's hope that she can pull herself right. She's still living and she still looks fairly healthy other than the ears, so let's hold thumbs for her. But we're drawing to the end of our show now. I'm going to be with you for the next couple of days. Really looking forward to seeing how the rain starts to transform all these water holes, and see how the season progresses, and really hoping to see our first baby impala on the water holes. Lovely to have been with you this afternoon. Goodbye. See you tomorrow.